from lawyers in which they describe you, and I'm quoting here, they describe you as, quote, vindictive, always looking for leverage and power, a prosecutor version of a drunk driver.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last part of that question.
I will state again. You started the meeting by emphasizing to the line attorneys that Danielle Sasson and Hagan Scott had failed to follow orders and that Ms. Sasson was going to be reassigned before she resigned. Is that correct? Federal prosecutors warning a U.S. Attorney's office that one of their prosecutors was, quote, a real recurring problem, and that you were not representing the office in a way that they thought the office would want it represented.
A DOJ nominee, Mr. Boie, faces intense questioning over past misconduct and recent actions seen as politically motivated. A senator highlights a 2080 letter from former prosecutors calling Boie reckless and power-hungry, and accuses him of pressuring DOJ attorneys to dismiss a corruption case and blindly follow the president's agenda. The exchange raises serious concerns about Bowie's ethics, independence, and fitness to serve in a role meant to uphold justice without bias.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one point?
Yeah.
We know we are operating under a 5-minute rule, but you've given some latitude, for example, to the last senator, and I'm not objecting to it.
What are you saying?
I'm saying the time to speak has been 5 minutes established. We've gone over that as a convenience to our colleagues, and I hope we'll continue that.
Okay.
In 2018, Mr. Bove, a group of federal criminal defense attorneys and former SDNY prosecutors in Manhattan were so alarmed by your pattern of unethical conduct that they wrote your supervisors at SDNY to warn them about you. I'd like to enter into the record a letter that I sent to Acting U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton of SDNY requesting more information about any internal or external complaints about you as a prosecutor. The letter contains the full text of that 2018 email from lawyers in which they describe you, and I'm quoting here, they describe you as, quote, vindictive, always looking for leverage and power, a prosecutor version of a drunk driver, completely reckless and out of control, quote, needing adult supervision. One attorney said that you, whatever due justice is supposed to mean, it doesn't apply to Bove. A former federal prosecutor who later litigated against you said, what Mr. Bove enjoyed most as a prosecutor was wielding power, a quality they described as the single worst possible trait for a public servant. Now, I read these because they're important, that these complaints are not an attempt to derail your nomination. This is from 2018, person after person. These complaints come from attorneys who practiced in federal court, some former federal prosecutors, warning a U.S. Attorney's office that one of their prosecutors was, quote, a real recurring problem, and that you were not representing the office in a way that they thought the office would want it represented. Your conduct was so beyond the pale back in 2018 that they wrote your supervisors to say you were a liability for the office. I think this is important because it shows a pattern of behavior. The allegations align with reports about your abuse of power now at the DOJ. I want to follow up in this pattern with what Senator Durbin's questions about the mandatory teams meeting you scheduled for all remaining public integrity section attorneys on February 14th, 2025. We already know that you're refusing to tell this committee whether you talked to Stephen Miller or others at the White House. All the chiefs and supervisors had resigned at this point, so all of the remaining and available attorneys were line attorneys in that meeting. Is that correct? Approximately 20 attorneys were on the team's call.
I do hope, Senator, that at some point I'll have an opportunity.
You were trying to find 2 attorneys to sign a motion to dismiss the Adams case without prejudice. Is that correct?
Yes.
During the meeting, you told attorneys that it is their job to implement the president's agenda and that they have to follow orders from the president and that there's no room for dissent in the chain of command. Is that correct?
No.
You told them that they had 1 hour to find 2 attorneys to sign the motion. They weren't allowed to ask questions. Is that correct?
No.
You started the meeting by emphasizing to the line attorneys that Danielle Sasson and Hagan Scott had failed to follow orders and that Ms. Sasson was going to be reassigned before she resigned, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last part of that question.
I will state again. You started the meeting by emphasizing to the line attorneys that Danielle Sasson and Hagan Scott had failed to follow orders and that Ms. Sasson was going to be reassigned before she resigned. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. You also told them that whoever signed the motion would, quote, emerge as the new leaders, end quote, of the public integrity section for doing so, correct?
I don't recall saying that.
So you don't know if you said that or not?
I don't recall saying that.
Edward Sullivan volunteered to sign the motion. As promised, Sullivan was promoted to acting chief of the public integrity section for dismissing that case. Is that correct?
No.
So you are saying that as the leader of the DOJ, you don't know who is in charge of public integrity?
No, I'm saying that the causal relationship that you implied in your question is not accurate.
Okay. We have you on the record on all of those points. You worked on January 6th cases while a prosecutor at the SDNY, correct?
A supervisor, yes.
An FBI agent described you as treating the January 6th cases as a priority when you were prosecuting those cases. But then you fired dozens of prosecutors and 8 senior FBI officials working on the case. Is that correct?
No.
So, Mr. Bove, I am hoping that more evidence is going to come out that showed that you lied before this committee. And I'm wondering where the lines are for you. What's the line in the sand when you wield awesome power of government? What is that line for you? Because clearly lying to a court isn't a red line. Referring to refusing to follow court orders isn't a line. Doxing judges and government officials isn't a red line. Intimidating attorneys you supervise into doing things they believe is unethical is not a line. So what's your red line? I really wonder. What could the president ask you to do that you wouldn't do? What wouldn't you do to win? A judge has to uphold core values and principles: independence, impartiality, integrity, diligence. A judge must be free from undue influence. A judge must decide cases fairly without prejudice or favor. A judge must ensure that anyone who appears before them in court will get a fair shake.
Thank you, Mr.
Everything
Booker.
we're hearing you say makes me believe that you're incapable of that. The pattern didn't just begin when you were nominated by this president. Peers of yours, prosecutors, attorneys who served with you, and judges in your past year have again and again cited you as someone who is not capable or qualified of doing this job in which you're nominated for. Thank you,
Ms.
Madam
Britt.
Chair.
Mr. Bove, thank you so much for being here